This is Trade Flow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. Trade Flow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil prices fell on Friday as skepticism crept into the market about the Trump administration's commitment to sanctions on Russia's two biggest oil companies over the war in Ukraine. Brent crude futures settled 5 cents, or 0.1%, lower at $65.94 a barrel, while U.S. crude futures finished at $61.50 a barrel, down 29 cents, or 0.5%. Both benchmarks had risen earlier in the session, extending gains of more than 5% made on Thursday after the sanctions were announced, but retreated in the last 2 hours of trading. They still ended the week over 7% higher, the biggest weekly rise since mid-June.
U.S. natural gas dealmaking has surged in 2025 and is set to accelerate, analysts say, driven by record power demand from AI data centers, rising LNG exports and renewed Asian investment. The United States is poised to see a record surge in power demand this year, led by data centers' outsized energy needs, the U.S. Energy Information Administration says. A steep pullback in benchmark gas prices last year from 2022's multi-decade highs after sanctions on Russia slowed talks, but a subsequent rebound, along with long-term LNG and domestic demand, has kept global buyers active.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Indonesia plans to impose a mandatory bioethanol content level of 10% for gasoline in 2027, part of efforts to reduce its fuel import dependence, its energy minister said on Friday. The Southeast Asian country is aiming to expand the use of biofuels made from palm oil and sugarcane to become more energy self-sufficient. However, ethanol supply constraints have delayed its plans to introduce mandatory bioethanol content for gasoline. Minister Bahlil Lahadalia estimated that Indonesia would need 1.4 million kiloliters of bioethanol to implement the mandatory gasoline blend of 10%.
U.S. energy firms this week added oil and natural gas rigs for a second week in a row for the first time since September, energy services firm Baker Hughes said in its closely followed report on Friday. The oil and gas rig count, an early indicator of future output, rose by 2 to 550 in the week to October 24, its highest since June. Despite this week's rig increase, Baker Hughes said the total count was still down 35 rigs, or 6% below this time last year. Baker Hughes said oil rigs rose by 2 to 420 this week, while gas rigs held steady at 121. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. China on Friday unveiled a proposal for a more stringent steel capacity swap plan to reduce existing capacity and rebalance supply and demand, 14 months after it paused the old program. The original swap plan required steel mills to remove at least an equal amount of older existing steelmaking capacity when they add new capacity as a way to curb oversupply. But China, which produces more than half the world's steel, halted the steel capacity replacement program from August 23, 2024 as it failed to rein in rampant expansion, leaving the industry with overcapacity that hit profitability.
Lithium carbonate futures prices in China hit a 2-month high on Friday, boosted by falling stocks and improving demand from the electric vehicle and energy storage sectors, analysts said. The most active lithium carbonate futures contract on the Guangzhou Futures Exchange touched its highest level since August 25 of 80,880 yuan, $11,354.77, a metric ton before pairing gains to close daytime trade 1.33% higher at 79,520 yuan. Benefiting from higher prices, shares of major producers like Ganfeng Lithium and Tianqi Lithium rose by 0.22% and 1.25%, respectively.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
White sugar futures on ice hit a 4-year low on Friday as the market continued to absorb data showing improved supply prospects, while cocoa and Arabica coffee also fell. White sugar settled down $6.50, or 1.5%, at $431.30 a metric ton, having hit its lowest since July 2021 at $430. Raw sugar fell 2.1% to 14.97 cents per pound, having hit a 4-month low of 14.93. The market lost 3.4% in the week. That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to Trade Flow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at Trade Flow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.